So I think I need to get out some plates and some cutlery and serve up a few slices of humble pie because I was profoundly wrong about the Oscars wins. And you were more right than I was. So you win.
I had a good night. Had I been betting, I did very well. The only thing I got, well, no, not the only thing, but what I got wrong, Timothée Chalamet. Adrian Brody did indeed come through as Best Actor. And actually also, though you weren't sitting with me at 1 a.m, I suddenly had a wobble on Mikey Madison and thought that Demi Moore was going to win the sympathy vote and then changed my prediction. But so I should have stuck. So I did have quite a good night. And I was pleased Anora won a lot. Though, as with all these things, you always think, oh, it wins slightly too much. It's like you tilt from one side to another. And I think I'd have liked to see Conclave and The Brutalist with a bit more love.
The thing that I enjoyed most was, the celebration of Wicked and The Wiz. And obviously Wicked didn't go home with too many Oscars, but it did pick up 2, including for Paul Tazwell, making history as the first black man to ever win a Best Costume Design Oscar, a regular on the stage, designing for shows like Hamilton. So it was lovely for him to be recognised.
So fabulous, yeah.
I also thought that they gave Cynthia Erivo a really lovely moment at the start of the show to do Defying Gravity, and there was a wonderful medley of songs based on the Wizard of Oz universe, and that was nice. It was classy. There's definitely some discussion needed about the format, and I don't think it's a very exciting evening if you're watching as a general layperson that isn't someone as obsessed with awards and theatre and film in the way that we are. But I thought it was a really lovely evening, and there were some really nice moments. And Sean Baker then saying, we all need to go out to cinemas and we need to experience these things together. Let's not sit at home on streaming platforms all day long and support communal entertainment was wonderful. As someone who works in theatre, it chimed exactly with what we talk about on this podcast. So that was lovely.
Exactly. And now on this week's podcast with me, this special bonus episode of the What's on Stage podcast, with me, Sarah Crompton, the critic.
And me, Alex Wood, the editor.
We're going to talk about theatrical awards.
Yeah, from the Oscars to the Oliviers.
I know. Very exciting week for people who are obsessed with culture.
And also for people obsessed with Adrian Brody and his incredibly long speeches. Picking up an Olivier nomination for the Fear of 13, which we have talked about at length on this podcast. And we are huge fans of that show and of his performance in that show. So it was very lovely to see both the show and him nominated. But what we're going to do is rattle through some of the headline numbers, some of the big wins for certain shows when it came to nominations, and also some surprises, shocks, snubs, things that might have wrinkled our brows or raised an eyebrow or two. Sarah, where do you want to start? I'm guessing it's with a certain Fiddler on a Certain Roof.
Well, yes. I mean, I am thrilled that Fiddler on the Roof has managed to garner 13 nominations, which makes it the most nominated show for the Olivier since Hamilton, which is astonishing. I loved Fiddler on the Roof, and I am happy with every one of its nominations. It is, I think, unexpected that it is so far ahead of everyone else and that people have loved it so very much, both as musical revival, for all its technical categories, for acting awards. I mean, it's just up there for everything. And for the score, actually, I think is brilliant that the Mark Aspinall has been recognised for what he did with the score in terms of the reorchestration and the cutting of the score and the way that he made it sound different. And I'm very, very pleased about that. So hooray! I mean, it's great, but it is very dominant. You always do, it takes me back to my Anora point, sometimes I think that a sort of propulsive energy builds up behind one show that perhaps could be shared a little bit more around with others.
I saw a really fascinating article by Andrzej Lukowski in the Time Out who said that Fiddler on the Roof didn't do one thing exceptionally well, but it did a lot of things very well or well enough to earn it a nomination, both on the creative side with Tom Scott's brilliant designs, with what Mark Aspinall did on the musical contributions and the supervision and orchestration, but also what the company did. You know, it's got some brilliant cast members involved. I think Liv Andrusia getting nominated for her performance as one of the daughters was wonderful, and she's definitely a rising star in the musical theatre world. But then also you've got Lara Pulver and Adam Danheiser, both nominated for their leading performances. And again, I don't think either of them were instantly like wow-inducing performances. You weren't bowled over. They were just incredibly well curated, and Jordan Fine has done an amazing job with the show, that everything felt like it brought its A game, even if it wasn't bringing superstar historic A game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the other musical revivals are also is really strong field. Hello Dolly with Imelda Staunton also nominated. Oliver with Matthew Bourne nominated for Best Choreography, and Paula Constable and Ben Jacobs nominated for the lighting, which is nice because it's Paula Constable's retirement year, so that's very good that she's nominated. So it's strong category. Revival, we're both happy, aren't we? Best new musical, we're both happy.
Yes, it feels as though it's a kind of a split between two runaway huge successes in the form of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Natasha Piet and The Great Comet of 1812, and then two, slightly more sort of like crowd pleaser oriented shows like MJ, which is a Broadway import, and then Why Am I So Single, which we've spoken about on this podcast as being, we're big fans of the show in terms of what it achieved musically, but it needed a bit of tailoring to be perhaps like the greatest musical of the year. But it's nice to see them recognised. I think it's great to see new talent recognised. And Toby Marlowe and Lucy Moss are two of the most exciting musical makers of the 21st century in the UK. That's pretty, I think it'd be hard to deny that. So it's great that this is at least a stepping stone for their careers. I probably expect that the winning show will be either Natasha Piet or Benjamin Button.
Yeah.
But we've also seen two big sort of blockbuster shows not get recognised in new musicals. So there's no Mean Girls in there, and there's no Devil Wears Prada in there. So that's quite a telling situation. So it'd be very intriguing to see what that means for their futures.
It shows you, it's been a strong year for new musicals, I think. I am more surprised that Mean Girls isn't in there than Devil Wears Prada, which has had a more muted response. So yeah, that is interesting. And on the subject of musicals, before we move off, Starlight Express hasn't been loved quite as much by the Oliviers as by What's on Stage. So it's got a respectable three
nominations, yes.
But hasn't been as dominant as it was in the What's on Stage Awards, where all our readers and listeners were obviously just swept away by having such a good time.
The fact it didn't get anything for Best Set Design, when of everything, I thought what was being done by Tim Hatley on that set in terms of transforming the Troubadour would be the most interesting thing about that show. And even maybe with some of the sound design with Gareth Owen and what he was doing with tailoring the sound design experience depending on where you are in the auditorium felt very innovative and new. So yeah, that was an intriguing one. I do wonder why.
Bit of a snub.
Maybe, it'd be intriguing to hear, it'd be a fly on the wall for the voters as to why they decided not to opt for it.
Perhaps they listened to Andrew Lloyd Webber at the What's on Stage Awards.
Oh God,
when he came up and announced that it wasn't the best musical. So perhaps they listened to him. I want to draw attention to one category, which is always the disaster category at the Oliviers. But this year has become a really, really exciting battleground, because Best Entertainment has many of my favourite shows in it. So it's Best New Entertainment or Comedy Play, and it has Ballet Shoes at the National Theatre, which is clever of the National Theatre to submitted in that category. The very, very beautiful Spirited Away at the Coliseum. Inside Number 9 Stage Fright, which we both loved from the Inside Number 9 team. But also Titanic, which has sneaked itself into entertainment and not into musical, which again is a clever decision, I think, because it isn't really a musical in any recognisable term, but it is jolly good fun, which makes it perfect in that category.
I would not be able to call that category, and I think any of those shows winning, I would be more than happy for them to be.
Yeah, I love them all, and they were all quite surprising shows. In fact, I mean, Ballet Shoes, I was very worried about because I was, loved the novel, couldn't quite see how it would work in the modern day, and it did work absolutely perfectly. It was a truly wonderful show. And Spirited Away, again, you think perfect cartoon, don't need to make a stage show of it, but John Caird and his team did something quite extraordinary with it. So, yeah, very, very hard to call that category.
In previous years, I would even say that category would sometimes be where producers want to put certain shows that they think won't stand a chance in the best new play field. So they opt for entertainment or comedy just to think they might have an easier time of getting the win. But this year, it almost stands as a tribute to just how diverse and interesting the West End can be as an ecosystem, that you can have shows that are based on animated classics or funny, whimsical, slightly surreal shows based on TV series going toe-to-toe. And then, like you say, surreal musical tributes to Celine Dion, all in the same mixing pot. And they do sit comfortably together. They don't feel at odds with one another, which is quite refreshing and quite new. So yeah, big win for entertainment or comedy in general. I think it's good, and I think it's rewarding that desire for audiences to see something slightly irreverent and escapist and silly, or something that just doesn't fit the conventional molds for a play or a musical.
And you've elegantly introduced the idea of the best new play, and that's a pretty strong category as well, because you get The Fear of 13 by Lindsay Ferrantino at the Donmar, which was based on a real life story, incredibly brought to life by Adrian Brody. Giant by Mark Rosenblatt, I would say, is the surprise play of the year, play about Roald Dahl and anti-Semitism that must have seemed like a gamble, but in fact stood up so strongly and is so brave. And it's a first play as well, because Rosenblatt is better known as director. And then Kyoto by Joe Murphy and Joe Robertson, Shifters by Benedict Lombay, which I think was probably a lot of people's favourite play. Kind of gorgeous, lovely thing. And The Years first at the Almeida and then at the Harold Pinter, which was an adaptation of Annie Ernaux by its director Elaine Arbo, and is, I think, probably for me, the richest play, though interesting because formally it's not quite a play. There's something interesting about its playing with form. So I felt happy with that list. What did you feel?
Again, I would be more than happy for any of those plays to win. It doesn't feel like there's a weak link there or something that's just been placed there politically. Those are all the best reviewed shows that we've seen on What's on Stage this year, I'd say. I love the fact that Shifters started off West End. Lots of producers got behind it very quickly, and it moved very speedily into the West End, where it found a lot more love. And it was a great celebration of Benedict Lombay, who's a rising star playwright and probably a rising star screenwriter. And Lord knows her career should become incredibly stratospheric.
Yeah.
It's in a similar vein to Benjamin Button, another off West End show that was catapulted into the West End by a group of producers who wanted to believe in it and knew that it would take time for it to find a strong following, and now it has. Similar to Operation Mincemeat last year, with what that pulled off after its numerous runs off West End. So really, the West End is proving how important it is to have that off West End environment sitting next to it in order to fuel all this rising talent. I saw Kyoto a few weeks ago, just around the WhatsOnStage Awards time, and I adored it, so I would not mind if that won. I think it flips the climate catastrophe narrative on its head, but actually reveals something a lot more pressing about it and something that's perhaps unspoken. But yeah, so I think all in all, I was nothing there shocked me or surprised me. Yeah, so there was a nice, warm comfort to knowing all of those plays are being recognised. And it was 5 rather than 4 nominees. That's great.
Even with 5 on the list, there is one notable omission, which is Slave Play. And I it's just interesting how that play didn't quite land here.
I totally agree, because I remember when they announced that it was coming, there was all that intrigue and saying this was the most nominated play ever on Broadway when it first had its debut in New York. However, when it came to London, the producers probably knew it wasn't going to have the same reaction, because I think that contemporary racism is treated very differently in the UK compared to the US. So I think it was always going to have a slightly different response from both the industry and audiences. But to see it get nothing is really quite telling about how there is that very strong difference between the theatre worlds on Broadway and in the West End, much to everyone's credit. What I've noticed over the last few years with shows like Cabaret, Streetcar, Operation Mincemeat, and now with this set, is I think that the Olivier voters are rewarding shows that are homegrown, that have started here, and they're willing to put more emphasis on those productions. And they are shows that are sort of sail in from New York, ready-made, and then just have basically a victory lap in the West End.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I say all that, and then Stereophonic is going to come in and win everything next year. But,
Yeah.
but it does, yeah.
It will be interesting to see how well Stereophonic does do here on that basis. But it's also true in Best Revival that they're very much the homegrown productions that have come onto that list, including the wild importance of being Earnest at the National, which, you know, was turning the importance of being Earnest into a pantomime, which obviously the Olivier committees like more than I did. I did feel that had gone too far. And Waiting for Godot, which I was very happy about. And Robert Icke's version of Oedipus, which probably, you know, on the list as it would be my favourite of this category, because I thought he did do something absolutely devastatingly brilliant with the play.
I guess that Robert Icke has won the battle of the Oedipuses, because the old Vix production isn't on that list, but although it did pick up some nominations, which we can get to a bit later.
It's got, we'll mention the choreography one, so it got best choreography for Hoffa Schechter, which to me was the most notable aspect of it.
Yeah, and Indira Varma also recognised for playing Jocasta, and we can talk a bit about her performance and Leslie Manville. But I also wanted to talk briefly about the shows that didn't make it onto this list, because that felt very dense and it felt like quite a level playing field. And you think about Brian Cox doing Long Day's Journey into Night, or you've got Dominic West doing A View from the Bridge, both solidly respectable productions that receive some pretty glowing notices. So even one final one would be Rebecca Frecknell's production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which, whilst I think you was in two minds about, there are some really glowing write-ups, and Rebecca Frecknell has been treated incredibly well by the Oliviers in the past, so it was quite interesting that she didn't make it on this time for that production. But even so, I'd say the four that did, overall pretty decent productions. But I would again agree that Oedipus, the Rob Icke Oedipus, is definitely the one that sits head and shoulders above in terms of quality and likelihood of victory.
And unless I've gone mad, Dear Octopus, which was my favourite revival of last year, is nowhere in these lists, which I think says something about how people perceive direction. Emily Burns is a quiet director. You wouldn't necessarily recognise a signature style. And I think all the other directors in this list, and indeed in the best director list, have a signature style. So the other best revival is Mackinac by Sophie Treadwell at the Old Vic, which was Richard Jones, which I didn't really care for because I thought it had been stylized within an inch of its life. So I would have had Dear Octopus there, but it did open very early in the year, so possibly it did just miss the qualification period, in which case it should have been nominated last year. And while we're on that, should we just look at Best Director?
Yes. I think Robert Icke, as we've said, is a very strong one. But again, I would be sore pressed to try and call who might win this, because what Elena Arbo did in the years, both as a director but also as an adapter, goes beyond, I would argue, what someone like Heitner was doing in Giant. They're very different asks and the results are incredibly different.
Yeah, and I think it's a fascinating category. So Arbo, Jordan Fine for Fiddler, Nicholas Heitner for Giant, and Robert Icke for Oedipus. They are all so good. And I do think it's a really tough category. I suspect Arbo might pull it off because The Years is so much her creation. But then, who knows, because Robert Icke with Oedipus, same is true. So interesting. What do you think about the acting awards, the acting nominations?
Yeah, there's again 5 strong in each. So I feel like the Oliviers kind of moving to this situation where all their lead categories are now going to have 5 nominees, and some unexpected presences, but also some really lovely ones. I'd say I wasn't expecting Mira Sayal to appear for A Tupperware of Ashes, but it's nice that her performance can stand out from a play that wasn't recognised at all. So that's great that the panel were being very meticulous with pulling out good performances. Same with Heather Agyapong for Shifters, as we've already discussed. And then we've also got Leslie Manville for Oedipus, Rosie Sheehy for Mackinac, and Indira Varma for Oedipus. That's what makes up the Best Actress category. Where would you put your money if you had to?
Well, Battle of the Eucastas, extraordinary really to get 2 people playing a 2,500-year-old play in your Best Actress category. Rosie Sheehy, having said I didn't like Mackinac, I did like her. So I'm thrilled that she is on the list because very much a rising star. And yeah, amazing committed performance. She might edge it, actually, I would say, if the voters wanted to go for youth. But my own, I think, would be Leslie Manville, who really made me cry. I thought that was an astonishing performance of such subtlety and sort of coiled emotion, where you get this sense that she suddenly realizes what's going on and it becomes unbearable. And I really was incredibly impressed with her. So she'd probably get my vote. Best Actors, interesting, isn't it?
Yes. So Best Actor, we've got Adrian Brody for The Fear of 13, Billy Crudup for solo play Harry Clark, Papa Essiedu for another solo play Death of England Delroy, John Lithgow for Giant, and Mark Strong for Oedipus. Interesting that a couple of solo turns there, picking up nominations, and even Brody, I think quite a lot of The Fear of 13 rests on his shoulders. But again, I wasn't expecting Papa Essiedu to be on there. I wasn't expecting Billy Crudup to be on there. But nice for both of those actors. I love Papa's just a brilliant performer and another huge rising star, probably one of the best success stories for the UK stage ecosystem in the last 10, 15 years. But again, I think Lithgow and Strong and Brody were kind of shoo-ins for that category.
Yeah, I think so. And I think my sense is that in the end, it will be a battle between Brody and Lithgow. So the voters might have to decide whether they want a very elegantly crafted speech from John Lithgow or a long and rambling one from Adrian Brody. I think that's more or less what the awards ceremony will be like. But I think they're both of them. I adored Papa, and I love the Mark Strong. I'm a bit surprised by Billy Crudup's appearance on that list, but that's me. But I thought both Brody and John Lithgow, you couldn't imagine the play without them. And I think that's the really sort of sensational thing about it.
Going back to what an Olivier Award nomination means, and I think we'll see this with what Papa Essiedu does over the next 10 years or so. Like maybe he'll be the next James Bond. You never know. Rosie Sheehy, looking through her credits under Best Actress, she's never not in a show. She's one of the most jobbing performers. She'll go straight from show to show to show to show to show, often flying under the radar, but being vital parts of some productions that are like lauded. and are remembered quite fondly. So it's nice for her to be stepping into the spotlight a bit more. I think she's currently on stage at the Hampstead Theatre downstairs in their intimate studio space in an interrogation. So it's great now for her to be recognised in the Oliviers, and who knows where she'll be going next. They might be able to build productions around her in the future rather than her being featuring in shows, and as they've done with Bacchanal. But I think that there's a very bright and exciting future to come for her, and it's great that the Oliviers can just add that little bit more fuel to the fire. What about supporting performances then?
Well, supporting has got, rather as in the Oscars, supporting has now got a very loose definition, I think. If we start with the men, Ben Whishaw has been nominated as supporting in Bluets, which was one of 3 equal leading parts. So I find that quite extraordinary that they've snuck him in there. And then in women, Romola Garai has been nominated twice, and in neither case do I really think she can be argued to be supporting, in the sense that in The Years she is one of 5 leading actresses, along with Gina McKee, who is also nominated in this category, and in Giant she is the leading female character. She slightly vanishes in the second half, but she is definitely, the main character. And I find that, weird. I'm very pleased Romola Garai has been nominated twice, because I think she has had quite a year. So that's great. And I don't know what I think about that category at all, really.
Yeah, it's funny because...
Who might win?
No, I think if you compare it to something like Six or Our Ladies of Perpetual Succor, where all of the performers get nominated together, it's interesting how in the years they've chosen not to do that, or there's been a decision made that that's no longer something that they're willing to do. Because they could have, like you say, nominated all 5 of the performers from the years in one entry.
Yeah.
In the same way, you had the 7 actors portraying the tiger in Life of Pi all nominated together. There is precedent for that. Clearly, they thought that McKee and Garai's performances stood on their own 2 feet, which I would be hard pressed to argue that, because all of those performances are so closely intertwined that they all rely on one another in order to succeed.
Yeah, and I think the danger is, that in both cases that the votes kind of cut against each other. So it's going to be hard. And therefore Sharon D. Clarke, who is the other nominee in this category, for her magnificent Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Honest, may well sail through like Lady Bracknell and take the prize, which I wouldn't argue with, because she was amazing.
Anytime Sharon D. Clarke wins an award, I just think it's the world doing something right for once. So.
Exactly. So let's say hooray for that.
Yeah, and then Tom Eden getting a nomination there for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, alongside George Bosch for Kyoto, Elliot Levy for Giant, and the aforementioned Ben Whishaw for Bluets. Nice to see Tom Eden there. He's sort of like a perpetual supporting player that often gets a lot of love at award ceremonies.
Yeah, I'm very pleased that he's there.
Didn't he win for when he was playing the butler in One Man, Two Governors? A show-stopping performance, yes.
He did indeed, which was the single funniest moment in One Man, Two Governors. And I, in a way, The Waiting for Godot is the same. It is an extraordinary show-stopping moment in the play. I was slightly surprised to see him there, but I'm really pleased to see him there, so I can't argue. I suspect Elliot Levy might walk that category for his performance in Jab, because it's the biggest of the parts, and that is definitely a supporting part, that he is the foil to Lithgow's Dahl, and I feel that might work in his favour, but we'll see. Quite exciting.
Yeah.
In Best Supporting in Musicals,
yes,
you were right.
So we've got Liv Andrewsia for Fiddler on the Roof, Amy DiBartolomeo for The Devil Wears Prada, Beverly Cline for Fiddler on the Roof, and then Mamuna Mamon for Natasha Pierre and The Great Comet of 1812. All certainly some of the best things in their respective shows, and Amy was the only one from The Devil Wears Prada to pick up a nomination. Rightfully so. She is far and away the best thing in The Devil Wears Prada. She has some show-stopping numbers. So yeah, I'm so glad that she's got recognised. But yeah, where were you most excited looking at that list?
Most excited, I suppose, I would go for Mamouna Memon in Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet, not least again because she's had an amazing year. She's been a figure who every time I see a show I like and a bit of music that I like, it seems to be delivered by her. So I'm very, very pleased she's there. Just looking at best actresses in musicals, you again were right in your predictions there.
Oh yes, because we've got Chamisa Dawnford-May nominated for her titular part in Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. Brilliant performance for her as Natasha. So excited. She'd already won a UK Theatre Award for playing the mistress in Evita, so she is on some trajectory right now. Then you've also got Lauren Drew, which was an unexpected one for me, playing Celine Dion in Titanic, getting an Olivier nomination. I don't think that would have been one that anyone was predicting when the show was being announced anyway, but love that she's got that. And I think, again, it's great to see.
She would have been lying on the floor this morning when that particular nomination was announced. But yeah, absolutely great to see.
It's great for comedic performances and unabashed comedic performances to be recognised for being incredibly hard to pull off. Because the rest of this category are quite earnest, quite serious, grounded performances, but hers is just relentless, probably exhausting comedic effort. So yeah, great news. So the other three there are Claire Foster for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a great performance, and she's incredibly lovely to interview. Lara Pulver for Fiddler on the Roof, and Imelda Staunton for Hello Dolly, and a WhatsOnStage Award winner, Imelda Staunton for Hello Dolly. Do you think she'll repeat the trick at the Oliviers?
I think she's the one to beat. I think she really is the one to beat. I think it will be very hard for anyone to defeat her. She's so loved, and that performance was much loved. And I think, yeah, she's probably the front runner in the category.
It would be nice to see someone like Chamisa getting it for, just someone, a rising star. And I think it kind of reminds me of like a Mikey Madsen versus a Demi Moore kind of situation. Not saying that Imelda Staunton is the Demi Moore of the musical theatre world, but in terms of a rising star versus someone that can just get a huge career boost. But yeah, who knows on the night? I guess even a nomination is enough to secure Chamisa Dawnford-May's status as a very prestigious musical theatre performer. But yes, on the actor in a musical side, do you want to run through and then we'll dish out some thoughts and then wrap up?
Yes, gosh. John Dalglish in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Adam Danheiser for Fiddler on the Roof, Miles Frost for MJ the Musical, which is it's got 3 nominations, that show, and that's one of them. Simon Lipkin for Oliver at the Gielgud, and Jamie Moscato in Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet. The surprise there being that again is quite a definition of lead. He plays Anatole rather than Pierre, who hasn't been nominated. So that's interesting.
Yeah, because I would never say Jamie Moscato didn't play a pivotal role in that production, because whenever he was on stage, you could feel the electricity in that room. He was so I when they announced the best supporting actor in a musical, I was surprised that he wasn't on there. And then when they came to best actor, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's where he's been placed. But do you think he can win it against some sort of like heavyweights like Simon Lipkin's expert crowd work in Oliver?
No, I wouldn't really think he can. I suspect that it's going to be the real starring roles, which, Benjamin Button, Tevier in Fiddler on the Roof, and Fagin, who they're the ones you really notice. I think that my own feeling is that Lipkin takes some beating because he did have an audience eating out of the palm of his hand. Yeah. And we'll see. We will see with that. And supporting actor in a musical, again, I find this weird because Andy Nyman's nominated for Hello Dolly. And yet, to me, he's the leading man in that show.
You almost want to swap Nyman and Moscato around, don't you? So yeah.
Feels odd to me that. And Raphael Papo for Fiddler on the Roof, Leighton Williams for Titanic, and Tom Zander for Mean Girls. That's a hard category to call, I think, though I suspect Nyman might do it. But they're all really nice. I mean, they're good set of performances again.
I would say that when the Tony Awards do their nominations, we always have in advance, we know what the eligibility criteria is, and they've made decisions about who's eligible in which category, so that when the nominations come about, there isn't really any surprise, really, because you kind of know from looking at the long list who's most likely. But for the Oliviers, because there's none of that, there is a bit more of a surprise, like, oh, okay, interesting that's gone there. And this is how the jigsaw puzzle is being put together, which I don't mind too much. I think the Oliviers have chosen to do that for a reason, and I think it displays a level of pragmatism that does allow performers and shows to shine in the right way. And if awards are there not only to crown a winner, but to provide a platform for shows and to provide a platform for the West End, then what's wrong with being a bit more pragmatic with the way in which you do that? It's funny that you can pull apart individual performances and say, oh, maybe that should or shouldn't. But the overall picture is, hooray, great day for London theatre. I think all in all, barring a few question marks, this is a very solid set of nominations. And I don't think there's too many quibbles that I'm going to sort of like lose sleep over.
No, I think that's exactly it. When I read it, I thought that is a really rich list, and how wonderful it has been to live through that year in London theatre. And I do think they've been clever how they've shaped it to reward all aspects. There are, as we've talked about, some things that I would have done differently. I think particularly around the years, which I feel sad that those 5 performances aren't recognised. It's so rare that you get an all-women ensemble, all brilliant, all of equal weight. And I wish that there'd have been a little bit of flex around that. But having said that, I think that the Olivier Award nominations are a cause for great celebration, and I shall watch with great interest to see who wins each category and see if I can repeat my Oscar predictive success.
Yes. And I think this time I'm actually probably going to be watching from the auditorium for the very first time for reasons not to be disclosed. So that would be very nice that I can actually soak all of that celebration in rather than being in the press room furiously trying to write down winners and interview stars. So I'm very much looking forward to it. And I want to see who they get to perform on the night, because you're going to get a big Fiddler on the Roof number. Are you going to get maybe something from Why Am I So Single? What would you get from Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet? Would it be Mamon singing Sonia Alone, or will it be a big number? I just can't wait to see how they pull off that event, because I think after last year where they did that gigantic coup in the form of Sunset Boulevard around the Royal Albert Hall with the Andrew Lloyd Webber cutout, they've definitely got some big shoes to fill in terms of trying to live up to that this year.
Well, all will be revealed and we will look forward to it. And for now, I think we should say goodbye. So it's goodbye from me, Sarah Crompton.
And it's goodbye from me, Alex Wood. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, and rate the podcast wherever you can. We'll be back on Friday with a special Q&A part 2 with some lovely answers around toilets and other things. So make sure you tune in then for a deep dive on all thing latrine. But for now, have a lovely rest of your week.